All right, let's try this again. Nobody knows this is happening, so this is kind of a test. Um, just threw it out a couple of places and figured I would see if it would stick. So we will see. Not planning to do this, so it's kind of all on the fly. As you can tell by my hair and the lighting, this is not a professional production, nor am I a professional YouTuber. This channel has been dead for years, but it's mine, so I figured I would show up and say something. Gonna wait to see if anybody shows up before I start, and then we'll go from there. Um, yeah, this is not a serious attempt at a stream, but it'll go on my channel. People can view it later if they want to, so I don't care. So, how about that WotC, which is kind of what this is about. But yeah, figure if anybody shows up, I will say my piece and then sit here and bullshit for the next hour. Um, so good chunk of my friends out in internet land are probably asleep. So because well, so many of them are overseas and it's already 8 o'clock here. So, but we'll see what happens. Um, Hello, DK Saxius. How's it going? This is just me kind of testing things out again, kind of getting back behind the camera or in front of the camera and on my headset, but um, kind of figured I'd also say a few things to anybody who wanted to listen about, my 2 cents about what's going on with the whole WotC shenanigans, and then just kind of bullshit and talk if folks wanted to. Um, Posted this on Geeks Discord, the old Geeks Discord, just because that's where I'm known lately. But this will technically show up on my own channel, so hopefully he doesn't mind me having folks come over. Uh yeah, Sexus, I get it. It's late, um, but I had time. Um, so yeah, kind of bottom line, the message that I wanted to convey, and this is actually, let me preamble here. Um, I've actually seen people talking about quitting D&D and even going so far as to get rid of or even destroy their stuff in outrage for over what's going on with Wizards of the Coast. And really what I wanted to say to folks is first, don't do that. That's ridiculous. You own the books, you own the stuff, you spent money on it, it's yours. Don't get rid of it. You'll regret it. I regret every piece of gaming material I've ever given away, sold, lost. The other part of that is I'm an old dude who's been doing this for a long time. I have over 40 years in the hobby. Started in 1979. I've gone through a few changes in D&D. I've gone through company changes in D&D. I've gone through, you know, D&D dying before. And it it's you're going to go ahead and feel really angry right now, and you're going to want to maybe get rid of or distance yourself from D&D. Don't do that. That is letting WotC and Hasbro control your fun. That is WotC and Hasbro controlling your hobby. Dungeons and Dragons does not need either of them to be enjoyed. You don't need a rule book for D&D. You don't need official supplements for D&D. You can pull up a PDF somewhere of an old copy of D&D, or a stripped down bare bones version, or an OSR version that is exactly D&D in every way, shape, and form, except for the name. There are other games that can play exactly like D&D plays, or close to, and they can be D&D. Many of them are D&D. They just have evolved into being something different. Pathfinder. Going further back, Palladium. They can't control how you enjoy the hobby. I have played Dungeons and Dragons for decades. I have played Dungeons and Dragons longer than WotC has been a company. I have played Dungeons and Dragons for ages without ever buying something new. You can write your own stuff, you can make up your own content. It's there. The same content can be mixed, matched, rehashed, revitalized, re-envisioned, however you want, ad infinitum. Hold on to your stuff. Don't get rid of it. And for God's sake, don't burn it. I've read some things about people burning. I don't know how realistic that is, or how how valid that is. But so beyond that, gaming as a hobby will continue. Gaming as a hobby has always continued. As long as there has been D&D, there have been other games, other tabletop RPGs to play besides D&D. As soon as D&D came on the scene, there were other people looking to reinvent that wheel. Sometimes in a much more round version of the wheel, sometimes a little square shaped, sometimes a little freaky, weird, 20-sided star shaped. But the hobby isn't theirs. The hobby is yours. The hobby is mine. The hobby is ours. So don't let them take it. And really, that's my message. We're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. The hobby's going to be okay. And D&D, if that's the only game you ever want to play and it's your favorite game in the universe, and I know people who are like that, keep playing. Don't stop. Play, roll dice, have fun with your friends, kick down doors, kill monsters, take their shit. Don't let WotC or Hasbro determine how you do that. So at this point, I've said my piece. Just gonna kind of ramble and chat and field questions if anybody has. Again, just kind of a test thing, but I figured I would say that part. DK, yes, even the bad stuff, because even the bad stuff has some merit to it. Has good ideas, a good mechanic. It's worth a laugh. Um, and what is bad at the time, you may grow into into deciding that you like it. There are plenty of game systems that I wish I still had, that I once owned. There are miniatures armies that I wish I still had. Um, it, it's, yeah, it's always useful. Um, you can always grab a mechanic here or there. Let's see. So I'm gonna hang around for a bit. If nobody else has anything else that they want to kind of say in the comments, that's all cool. I don't have StreamYards or anything yet set up anyway. Set up yet. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm gonna dive back into the channel, but it's been bugging me, and I ran into some folks today who really seem to want to just be done with D&D, and it's going to sound a little dramatic, but that hurts. I mean, as somebody who's really enjoyed this hobby and that particular game for so long. The idea that somebody would give up on a game that they super love just because an asshole corporation decides that they're going to go ahead and pull a dick move like they did, um, that's too bad. That's they don't have that right. They don't have that power. And I mean, I could have played D&D all these years with the stuff I bought in '79, but I kept evolving through the game, and I will continue evolving through the game. If D&D slips hands to another caretaker who wants to do it right, I'll keep playing. Um, yeah, it's let's see, sections. Yeah, I'm done with D&D as a WotC Hasbro brand. And what the sad part is, and I really want to say this too, is I have I know people who work for WotC. I've known people who have worked for WotC. I lived in the area when WotC came up, and friends of mine have been artists for WotC. Friends of mine have been writers for WotC. They've been retail employees for WotC. The I have a hard time believing that much of this comes from WotC itself. This is Hasbro. WotC is people who love this game. WotC is people who have been in the game for a long time. There are a lot of people at WotC who go back in the game as far as I do, or just shy of that. They've been, but even that said, they've likely done more with the game than I ever have. A lot of them are hardcore players, and while I played a lot, there have been lean times, and I played my own special little brand. This is Hasbro. Hasbro is a giant faceless mega corporation who wants to treat everything like it's Transformer. And they don't understand that tabletop RPGs are not the same sort of thing as a GI Joe or a Transformer or a My Little Pony. Um, yes, you can do some of the things with it that you do with those, and I would like to see um, them do so. I would love to see another range of D&D action figures. As a kid, I ate those up. I would love to see another D&D cartoon. I liked the one when I was a kid, and watching the old D&D cartoon as an adult, I found that there's a lot of stuff to mine out of that as a DM. I think having a D&D cartoon in one form or another, whether it's a silly goofy thing or a serious thing, kind of like the new or somewhere in between, like the Critical Role cartoon that came out and all that, um, or Dragon Prince, um, that could be good and would be good for the hobby. People would see that, they'd want to play it, they'd get into the hobby. Um, but it doesn't translate one for one. You can't do the things you can do with toys and licensing with tabletop RPGs in the same way as you do those. I mean, it's you can literally buy 3 core books in this hobby and never have to buy another thing and play for years and years and years. There are things that they can do if they want to really try to monetize D&D that are not horrible, predatory, and just absolute dick moves. Um, they, you know, the reason I'm sure folks who are listening to this or watching this later, you know, the OGL was created because it was recognized that the parent holding company, WotC at the time, was in better financial situation if they focused on core materials and large scale supplements and let somebody else do the massive amounts of modules and other supplements. Those lower lower profit, higher risk materials they could leave to somebody else, and that's how this hobby grew to be what it is now. It's how the company grew to be the point where Hasbro even noticed. The IP is big and where it is because everybody was contributing to it in a way that made this wonderful ecosystem of an RPG. You could get D&D, and you right now up until this point, you can get D&D in any flavor. If you want space D&D, you can play space D&D. If you want modern D&D, you can play modern D&D. If you want funky mecha fantasy D&D, you can play that. You can play anime D&D. You can play horror D&D. And that's just D&D. That's not even getting into all the other games. Um, so yeah, and um, yeah, it's yeah, this stream is very much a floundering stream, and I'm aware of it because it was like nothing planned. Again, this is completely off the cuff. I'm just gonna sit here for a bit and see who else shows up and chat. Um, I you know never fancied myself much of a. I'm not a content creator. I'm not a YouTuber. Um, I had a channel and it went really nowhere. And I'd like to get back to it just to do it. If it goes somewhere, cool. If not, great. I have a day job and I have my own income. I don't need YouTube to be successful for me. Um, um, yeah. So if you are angry with WotC right now, and you probably are, um, now would be a good time to check something else out. D&D is off your plate. There's plenty of other stuff out there. Um, it's countless games across the shelves. You might want. I mean, if the new OGL does take effect and becomes the draconian thing that it is, some of these things may be disappearing quick, um, because the new OGL seems to want to make all that old stuff problematic for the creators. I don't think it'll actually happen. I think Wizard of the Coast, Hasbro will have shot themselves in the foot, try to make a repair, and find that they just can't. I've been saying it in comments left and right. I will never trust the company again to. I'll never trust them again to hold their word, hold to their word. I mean, it's just the OGL was supposed to be a positive community building thing and was pretty solid and pretty healthy. And they went in and acted like they could just erase that. And they've printed retractions and half-hearted replies, all of which have wonderful backhanded remarks in them. The we won. It's not just they won or and we lost. We all won. No, you didn't. You got your asses handed to you, and people are mad, and you make yourself look like a bunch of schmucks by trying to pretend otherwise. Have some humility. Just say we screwed up. We'll try and fix it. But even still, they've shown their hand. They've shown what they want to do, what their intention is, what they would like to have happen. And so, even if they fix the OGL, even if they present something more positive going forward, there will always be that sort of Damocles hanging over every creator who embraces that OGL as, for the day when WotC decides, well, again, Hasbro decides WotC isn't being profitable enough, D&D isn't profitable enough, and then they try to play their hand again. And while Hasbro can afford for that to fail, third-party creators can't. The suck part of this all is if D&D as a brand fails, it's very likely Wizards of the Coast will go away or get sold off. Not likely, though. It'll get dissolved. Hasbro will hold on to Magic the Gathering, and D&D, and they will lock it away. It's an IP that has proven to be very profitable, and they won't want to let it go. Just like every other IP they have ever owned. They have a big evil corporate vault that I'm sure is staffed by goblins and ogres, and they will lock it away there until they decide that they can swing it for profit again. We saw this with action figures. We've seen this with other properties that come out every so often. Every decade there's a new version of this, that, or the other because they want to try and push it again. And so then D&D would go away, or it would slip into obscurity, or it become some sort of weird elitist collectors only kind of a thing. Like a lot of the GI Joes and Transformers that are out there. I use those as reference because they're recognizable brands. A lot of those are way outside the price point of the average person. Um, and they're often not sold through Hasbro. They're sold through people they've licensed the IP out to. Um, you know, yeah, I remember being able to go ahead and grab GI Joes with my allowance as a kid, and I don't think you can really do that anymore. Because to sell them that cheap, they have to make very little money, and shareholders don't like that. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, it's a kind of a weird time, and hopefully things will get better. Sergeant Mushroom, I am trying to come back at some point. As you can see behind me, I have a space. Um, I guess here's a way to fill some stream. The reason that I stopped my channel is that I had reached almost 70 episodes and had accumulated, I think, just over as many followers in 5 years of being on YouTube. Um, I couldn't find a voice, and the amount of time that I was willing to put into it, that I want to put into it, was such that um, it wasn't gonna shine or stick out. So um, there was no way that my voice was really gonna matter or get out there. Times have changed, it seems. In the time I've actually been not YouTubing, I've gained another 20 plus followers. I'm almost up to 100 followers, which isn't a lot, but when you consider my channel's been dead for years, and I keep getting followers, a lot of them came on board looking for me, I'm sure, when I started showing up on the old geeks streams. Um, but this kind of format of a guy sitting in his basement with his gaming stuff behind him um, seems to work now. It didn't used to back then. You had to have lots of graphics. You had to have you know, a lot of production. Even if you were still just talking heads in front of a camera, you had to have some sort of production. Um, and hey, Omen, um, that is the guy to ask about what games are also out there. Omen L is the man who looks at all of the games. And him and I may not agree on everything, but it's usually more friendly arguments or just trying to see two sides of the same discussion. But yeah, I would like to get back into doing this. I think doing some streams with guests would be a good way to get things going. Kind of borrowing the format of so many other YouTubers. Um, and then when I feel like I have something to say or that I could go into more, then I might start doing episodes again. But don't, Omen. Buy all of the games that you want and enjoy them. Uh, but yeah, so that's why I stopped, and I'm I am now a 50 some odd year old, 40-year gaming vet. Um, Not a veteran. I'm not actually a vet, but a veteran of gaming. I would never claim that. Just not right. But and I've got no kids in the house anymore. Empty nester. Get a lot more time on my hand, and so why not? Uh, yeah. I mean, authenticity is great. Um, this looks a lot better than what I had before. Before I was in my garage, which while it had been set up as a usable space, was a shared space. So like my freezer was behind me, and the kids and the cats would come in through, and the space wasn't all mine. Um, this is a basement, a corner of a basement, which is all mine. Um, and so um, it says gamer a little bit more than it says dad in his garage. Um, uh, Miniature stuff back there and down there and everywhere. Um, it's not just tabletop RPGs. In fact, I probably spend more time doing miniature stuff than tabletop RPGs, but miniatures are easier to engage with on your own. So if you ever have minis questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Um, but yeah, so going on 26 minutes, said my piece, answered a few questions, saw a few folks come in. Don't know if this is going to go too long. I think what I will try to do in the future is schedule something and make people aware of that ahead of time and see what that has to do, or what effect that has on the stream, and then go from there. But this is really about me just kind of speaking up, getting my face in front of the camera, and seeing how comfortable I am again. I'm a horrible introvert. Um, I've got massive ADHD and anxiety, and so getting out there and just putting myself in front of things has always been tricky and difficult. Um, Being on Geek Stream has helped. I go on there with my camera on, and people can see me, and that has put me in in a position where I think I'm a little bit more ready. Um, I'm also in a stage in my life where I'm having to adapt a bit. I moved halfway across the country from where I used to live, and so I'm really in a position where I'm trying to like fix me. you know and that's, I'm not having a midlife crisis. I'm actually having a midlife reconstruction. um I gotta meet new gamer friends, and I've gotta try and interface with the gaming community out here, where I live now, over here in St. Louis. um but yeah, so I think at the half hour mark, if folks aren't asking questions or coming up with anything to zing at me, then I'm probably going to close it out. Um, but thank you to the folks who did show up, and appreciate seeing you here. Um, it does mean a lot to know that I've made so many new friends in the internet space. Um, and, you know, gamers are good folks for the most part. There are problematic people, just like every other community, and there is friction. Um, I just dealt with a big batch of gatekeepy bullshit in a in a miniatures group today, which was redonkulous. Um, you know, there are bad people in every group, and some people are not necessarily bad, but are still problematic. I mean, I'm sure that in my time as a gamer, I have created problems for other people without even knowing it, because my perspective was such that I didn't understand or see what their difficulties were in the hobby, or what opportunities there were for me to help them out. Um, and I am at a space in my life where I want everybody to enjoy this hobby. I want everybody to play games. My kids grew up playing games. I was introduced to my wife because she plays games. I mean, she's been at D&D almost as long as I have. Well, that's not true. She played in high school, so and she's younger than I. But um, let's see. Would I say gatekeeping is worse in the miniatures community? I am not qualified to say that. I think gatekeeping in the miniatures community comes down to, I would say it could be considered worse, um, but also no. In RPGs, in the tabletop RPG community, most of the gatekeeping I see is based on who you are or who people think you are, um, and not what you do. There is some behavioral issues, and honestly, that's not really gatekeeping. If somebody's a dick and they want to come to your table and you don't let them play, it's not because you're a gatekeeper, it's because they're a dick. In miniatures, people will gatekeep you over your choice of army, the your ability to paint, whether or not you do or don't paint your miniatures. Some people don't have the time, the ability, the inclination to paint their miniatures, or to paint them fast, or to paint them good. Um, but the playing has always been, for me, the playing of miniature games has always been the important thing. And uh, I am guilty of not painting miniatures. Painting miniatures is a chore for me. I go so far as to have miniatures on the table, but they are very often going to be unpainted or in some state of in progress and maybe forever. I had a 6,000 point Imperial Guard army by fourth edition points values in 40K, and I owned that thing for years. And I think maybe 5% of the entire army was painted beyond a base coat. Never had anybody complain in my circles. They were much happier to have me at the table. But back to your question, um, I think based on those on that the on the criteria that I just set there, I would say that miniatures gaming is probably worse because people will still gatekeep you based on who you are or who they think you are, but they will also more frequently gatekeep you based on what you do, not how you behave, but how you choose to engage it with the hobby. Role players tend to be much more open, I feel, in regard to people just wanting to play, and there's less of this, oh, you're a min maxer, you're a hack and slasher, um, don't play with me at all. Most gaming groups are made up of a combination of those things. You'll see some of that, like, oh, you're just a hack and slasher. We're a very dramatic, story based, deep role play type of group, and I still have a hard time considering that gatekeeping because they are that's I heard a term today that I actually like, and I have to agree with. It's a term. The term was used. It was Greyhawk Grognard said, table keeping, keeping your table the way that you want it, and making sure that people are playing to the standards of your table, and that the not sanctity. It's such a sanctimonious, no pun intended, uh, term, the integrity of your table. I don't know, it's the wrong word still, but making sure that your table continues to function is important. Um, you know, it you have to make sure that everybody can play together. And if you are a high drama, deep role playing, long story based sort of a table, and some guy comes to your table who really just wants to eat chips, burp, and kill ogres all the time, it's not going to be a good match. He's not going to have fun. You're not going to have fun because you're going to have to be dealing with him all the time. Um, but yeah, long-winded answer, and I'm certainly good at that. Um, yeah, I would say miniatures are probably worse because there's more criteria on which people will gatekeep you. Um, Even people who love the game and want people in it will find reasons to gatekeep in miniatures gaming. The button counters are the most horrible ones, long standing. The guys who will argue with you over the correct number of buttons on the sleeves of such and such troop. Uh, Edition snobs is a thing, yes. Uh, I don't understand edition snobbery. Um, and I'm I've been in the game long enough and been exposed to enough content from the official sources and outside the official sources and everywhere in between that I know that everybody I will say this and I hold true to this statement all the time. No matter what you think D&D is or insert favorite game is, you're wrong. Flat out, your version of D&D is not the correct version and it's not the version that everybody's playing. There is no right way to play it. So arguing over editions is stupid. Um, because even within an edition, there were so many different ways to play it. The creators of the game did not play it in a way in any way that was expressed in the rules, in the published rules. Um, hey, Adric. Um, Yes, every table has its own flavor. There are, and actually, there's been a lot of interesting talk recently of like regional styles of play. Evidently, further back, this was a thing. I think that's because we had uh, less internet, or no internet. Hey, Robin. Uh, so regional styles may have been a thing just because everybody learned to play from other folks in their area. But yeah, and it's funny to that comment. Table flavor might even change within the same group depending on what the exact makeup of that group is. And, you know, one or two players swapped in or out can fundamentally change how the group plays. I've had people who, I'm lucky enough to have had players who would play anything. Like any game I threw down in front of them, they would play. Um, they may not play them well, but they're willing to play. Um, I've had some people currently have somebody in my game right now in my fifth edition game who has told me flat out that if we ever switch games for the game group, they will just wait till D&D comes back around in the rotation. To me, that's such a foreign idea. Like I want to play other games and I want to jump around, and being a single game kind of a person is just kind of weird for me. But this person is more content not playing and waiting for D&D to come back around. Um, and that's cool. That's their style. That's their flavor. You know, my wife is not the big turbo gamer that I am. I eat, drink, sleep. I wake up in the morning. Hey, I had this idea. She's not like that. Um, Not every gamer is. Um, but yeah. So hey, look at that. You guys managed to keep me going for another 10 minutes. Uh, um, and yeah. So Adric on here is one of my players that I have played with in the past in person. Um, so Um, yeah, it's unfortunately one of the players that I left behind when I moved from my home state. Um, but so what is everybody playing? I know Saxius, you have a couple of games going if you're still here. And Omen, I think you're involved in a couple of games. Uh, Currently, my hobby project is painting little tiny mecha for miniatures gaming. So these are minis that I had sculpted and had produced and are tiny in metal. Star Wars D6, awesome. Which version? Which edition? First, I mean, they're all interchangeable as far as I'm concerned, because the core system really didn't change. But I love D6 Star Wars. To me, it's the only Star Wars game, RPG. The Fantasy Flight one, I could see the potential there, but I feel like the barrier to enjoyment, not barrier to entry, but the barrier to enjoyment in the Final Fantasy, fighting fantasy, Final Fantasy Star Wars would be a completely different thing. Fighting fantasy, or fighting fantasy, curse you geek, Fantasy Flight, Jesus Christ. um, the barrier to enjoyment was too high. Um, you had the system had a lot to go on and a lot to work with, but you had to learn special dice. You had to learn how that system worked with those special dice. One of the problems I had with Fantasy Flight's Star Wars is the starting point for characters seemed to be too far along their journey as a Star Wars character. Um, um, yeah, it's okay. So, Star Fantasy Flight, I feel like your character is starting somewhere around, if I'm going to frame it in the original trilogy, West End Games allowed you to make from the beginning a New Hope character. Fantasy Flight assumes that you are starting somewhere around Empire or Return of the Jedi as far as your character's progression and power, things like that. I tried to make a grassroots character for Fantasy Flight, and the amount of skills that you're required to take building your character, I ended up having to reskin that into some sort of community leader character, of a agricultural kind of commune rather than an actual farmer. Um, and in Star Wars, you can literally in D6 you can literally play a kid, walking around with a slingshot and a dead lizard in his pocket if you wanted to. Um, yeah, it's very collaborative narrative design, and that is awesome if you have a group of players who know how to do that and are willing to buy into that. When we played, because it was with Adric that I played, um, there were some cool things. Like I shot at a bad guy and I missed, but my dice said that there was some advantage to me. Even though I missed, there was an advantage. So we were able to say that I was able to force him out of a cover. And that's cool. And that's neat that those dice can do that. But you have to be so on it and trying to interpret those dice for it to mean anything. And so that is an extra barrier to the enjoyment of the game. Um, it, yeah. So I mean, whereas West End Games is very much older school game where you roll dice and you find out what you do. Now, because the die mechanic is built around the concept of difficulty levels, you can also interpret the level of success from a die roll that's not aiming at a particular difficulty level, just simply by taking that total and saying, well, you got a 25, you did something. Not only do you accomplish your goal, but you also achieved something extra. You can do the same thing that Fantasy Flight does, but I think it's less uh, there's less song and dance. You know, West End Games is dancing. Fantasy Flight's version is interpretive dance. Um, so, uh, if I had to put it in short. And so, Sergeant Mushroom has outed himself as a friend of mine from back in the day too, and went to school with. So, but yeah, it's I will I would run Star Wars in a heartbeat. Uh, Anybody ever wants to play Ewoks, I have a campaign idea. But um, um, yeah, it's there's a lot of games I would like to play. It's really hard now. It seems like it's really hard nowadays to find people willing to play other games. I know it's a matter of time, and there's always a matter of taste. But I just I grew up and came up in gaming, maybe in a nice, unique little situation, a unique bubble of people who were really willing to play a lot of different games and to try new games. If it wasn't D&D, it was Star Frontiers or it was Top Secret. And then as I went on in life, it became Star Wars or Palladium Fantasy or Robotech or Beyond the Supernatural or Chill or yeah. um yeah. Yeah. To me, um the Ewok game would play a lot like a fantasy RPG, I feel. Not in that there's a lot of fantasy going on, but the fact if you're playing in um because the idea for my campaign would be to play pre Empire on Endor, um with the Ewoks doing what they're doing. And I feel like there's a certain fun meta there because all the players know what the future of Endor is and what the future of the Ewoks is. And so as you're going around playing the game, it's contextually sort of framed within this, the happy days before stormtroopers and ATSTs, um and before an artificial moon exploded above our planet. um yeah, that would be fun. I've got some cool ideas for that. um all right, so kind of reached my maximum time for tonight. Again, I appreciate everybody coming out. Nice to see the support from friends, both internet and real life. Um, and Star Frontiers, first RPG exposure. You played. I never knew you played Star Frontiers. I had Star Frontiers. We went to high school together, and we never played Star Frontiers. You were holding out on me, man. Um, I've played it 3 times. I never got to play it enough. Um, Robin, yeah, that was the goal for today. And even if people don't see the stream and live, it's going to be on my page. It's kind of like going into somebody's crappy craptastic comments on in a hobby group on Facebook and refuting their claims or making statements that kind of reject their position, even though you're not necessarily arguing with them or you're not trying to tell them what to do or how to enjoy their hobby. You want to put that message out there because you don't know where somebody's first point of contact with the hobby is going to be. I had this happen earlier. Somebody had posted a thing on, what games are you getting into now that D&D is, craptastic? I don't know what exactly the wording was, and I'm like, I'm gonna play D&D. you know, you know, I'm gonna keep playing D&D. And they're like, well, that's not what I asked. I'm like, I get that, but understand that D&D continues even though Hasbro decides that they're gonna be douches about it. So yes, message of hope, message of positivity. Um, And thank you. I appreciate everybody showing up. Hopefully, this is the start of me coming back more often. If people like to just sit here and see me talk about stuff, um, brevity is something I'm going to try and work on. I may even do scripting, or at least an outline. But yeah, I'd like to actually get a mic so I don't have to use the headset all the time. But money is a thing that I do not have a ton of, and it can go to other things so much more happily, like paints and miniatures and gaming books. Uh, um, but yeah, I need to close things out because I'm gonna have to go feed my wife and have dinner. So thanks all, and it does mean a lot that y'all showed up. And please spread the words of hope about the hobby. A lot of people, Omen, if you're still on here, this is speaking to something that you and I talked about. There's going to be a lot of people who are just going to be done or feel they have to just be done. It's and that's sad. Without people saying things are going to be okay, we're going to have people look at what's going on right now, and D&D being the only game they ever knew, and they're just going to quit. And that would be a shame. That's a shame for them, a shame for the community, and a shame for the hobby. There's so much to get out of these games, and yeah, Hasbro doesn't get to control that and pick and choose where and when and how we have that fun. So I'm gonna end on that note. Um, take this message, spread it around. Make sure that folks know that you, me, and the hobby are going to be okay. Uh, exactly. Mushroom. Exactly. Excuse me, Sergeant Mushroom. You didn't serve to be called just a mushroom. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but um, yeah, I gotta go. And if you guys keep asking me questions, I'm gonna keep staying around. But thank you all, and get out there and game.